Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Spider Sound Off. This is Tom.
And this is Porter.
And it is Easter Sunday. It's also D Hall's birthday. And we are doing our first post since our women's team got eliminated. Or I guess, first post following that kind of sad final post. But we're back, kind of a little bit of portal's not open yet, so this is like the pre-portal pod, and then we'll do a post-portal pod, and maybe something in the middle, but we'll see.
It's a little weird because we haven't done this in a while, and so we went from this routine where we were doing 2 a week to it's been maybe 2.5 weeks since we last did this. So that's kind of an interesting little stint. What did you do while we took our break? You didn't travel, did you?
You know the answer to that question. I took a week trip to Ireland and Scotland with my wife and some friends from the neighborhood. So that was a fun little trip. A lot of Guinness.
My question for you was, why didn't we register any Scottish or Irish listens while you were overseas? And we got 30 countries. I mean, that would have been a nice
because you didn't put out any new material, Porter. Like, you knew I was leaving town. I'm not going to listen to old podcasts. I don't care. Like, I'm not the one who's counting every day how many countries we're in. That's your job. But if you put out some new material.
You could have taken us to 32. I could have put some weird episode out about a possum underneath our floor, but I didn't do that.
Yeah, so you guys all missed out. I tried to train Porter up just in case, if the women advanced, like I wasn't going to be here, and he was going to do a pod all by himself. And we all wanted the women to get out of Durham, but I think you were all we're blessed to not have Porter try to do his own podcast. I don't know what that would have looked like, what it would have sounded like. It may have taken you back to the 80s in terms of production quality.
Full disclosure, I would have been ready. I would have been 100% ready, and it would have been a glorious episode.
Okay, so let's talk about what's happened. We've got some news. We'll talk about the men's first. You went to that press conference, right? Mooney had a presser at the end of March.
Yeah,
and that was right after they announced Argerbright was coming back.
Yeah,
that was the main news we wanted to make sure we heard.
Yeah, it was a good get for the program. I mean, full disclosure, we don't know how much Argerbright's getting paid. John O'Connor tried to get that out of him during the press conference. But to some degree, we had to lock up our best player before the portal action starts. It's kind of like back when the Washington baseball team signed Jason Worth out of Philly. I mean, they needed to get a player just to show the world they were ready to win. And then, that was the first of many signings for Washington before they went on to win the World Series eventually with Scherzer and Strasburg and those guys. To me, you got to lock up Argerbright because it shows the market that you're serious about winning. And so I like that. I did.
Yeah, I think that was clearly the move we had to make to start. He was our best returning player. Now, Porter, you asked him who else was returning.
Yeah,
you got a little nugget out of him.
I mean, full disclosure, John O'Connor gets to ask questions first, or maybe he just takes the mic and runs with it. I'm not sure, but maybe that's just seniority built up over time. So he asked like 12 really good questions, and I'm just going down my list of stuff I was going to ask, scratching it off because O'Connor sniped it, right? And then I get to Argerbright, and I snuck in a question of, can you tell us who else is coming back? And he answered it. He said, Rob, he hopes, Will Harper. He said Jaden, which is Jaden Daughtry, and Tanner. So if you do the math, Tom, and I've done it because we're recording today, here's how I count it. We got J-Rob 1, Will Harper 2, Daughtry 3, Tanner 4, Argerbright 5, Hominick, Richardson 6 and 7, Mooney 8, 9 through 11 are the 3 incoming freshmen. So that means we have between 4 and 5 guys that we're going to take from the portal. I also asked Mooney what's his preference on roster size, and he talked about he prefers 16 because of the way it allows him to practice. And he kind of dropped a little nugget that not everybody at the bottom of the roster is going to get paid. So, but he also then said it's important to make sure people have that expectation. If you're coming in on a scholarship for the bottom of the roster, you might not be being given any pay for play money. So Means we're going to be looking for 4 or 5 players. So I think you're going to listen to or hear a series of announcements coming out probably over the next month and a half of some new players coming to Richmond. So it'll be exciting time.
Yeah, one thing, interesting kind of a roster construction, and I'll reflect back on last year, which was not a great year, but when we were in the summer and in kind of the uh, let's say the preseason period, although it certainly lasted for a month or so into the season, we heard coach say that like our roster, like the difference between the best and the worst player was pretty narrow, and that was a positive thing to him, and we're going to get to play a lot of people and have this kind of rotation. Like and this is all speculation because we don't have any inside information here, but like in hindsight, it's like we had, again, and Aiden was a freshman, just gotten to campus, or who, so he hadn't emerged yet. Like I think I look back at those conversations and say we had a bunch of players that were very similar, but no one was great. And I do wonder if the old mentality was let's take the portal money we have and spread it around everybody. I mean, Mooney mentioned, I think he told us that like, hey, there's something interesting about redshirting someone because they could get paid for 5 years, which kind of implies like red shirts were making some sort of money. And I think there's a natural, like, I hope we don't take whatever money we have left in our budget and get 5 guys that are worth the same. Like I want
Right.
2 studs and then 3 guys who are going to contribute. But I don't want 5 guys who are each worth $200,000. I'd rather have, 2 $750,000 guys, and then let's see what happens.
Well, so presumably, Walls and Will Johnston and so those guys graduate, and that frees up some money that's coming our way. The rumors are that we're getting more money, and that was all. We talked about that on previous episodes. You also let's talk about who's not coming back or who has entered the transfer portal, I should say. Mikhail Tyne is in the transfer portal. That's actually, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but it's just factual. David Thomas is in the portal. McLaughlin is in the portal, and AJ Lopez is in the portal, even though I thought AJ Lopez had graduated. But I guess there's some hope with this executive order that maybe a 5th year can be granted again type thing. So that just came out.
It's interesting.
So
no, but you're right. So that's and Porter, you've heard me say this before. It's like for all that we know, officially the portal opens on the 7th, so after the championship game, so on Tuesday, and you can officially, if you're assuming you're not a graduate transfer, you've got 2 weeks to put your name in the portal. So even folks that we think are staying, like until you get to the 22nd and you haven't heard them put their name in the portal, like nothing's guaranteed.
Right.
It'd be certainly surprising, obviously, if Argerbright wasn't here. But if someone came to him with $2 million, I don't think we'd compete, and then he'd be gone. Now it's more of, I think it's like the Thomas Bryson kind of Tyne group, or if someone else joins that group. That also doesn't mean they're gone either. We've seen people who enter the portal and then pull their name off the portal. So there's we'll see what happens, and we'll know a whole lot more in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, one other interesting nugget. So I had a side conversation with Jason Vida because I was trying to figure out a little bit on portal strategy. So I did not realize this, but you cannot graduate from the University of Richmond unless you earn half of your college credits at the University of Richmond. And what that means is we can't go after a senior, somebody who's got 1 year of eligibility left that probably has 75% of their credits already fulfilled, and have them graduate from Richmond. So it takes a chunk of the portal away from us that we can't do that. And I didn't know that. And I'm not sure if the whole fan base understands that or not as well, but we got Johnston and we got Lopez last year because they were grad transfers, but we cannot go after a player who has 1 year of eligibility left who has not graduated for that reason, which was pretty surprising to me. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. It doesn't explain why, but you look back to last year when we got Daughtry and Thomas, like they had 2 years left.
Right.
And that's encouraging, and kind of, I think we're all hoping Daughtry is back. And like it gives you not just that 1 year to try to do something. Like you've got a player that you can develop and have them grow. So even without knowing that rule, I kind of preferred getting folks who have more than 1 year, because if it works, then yes, you're going to have to pay them more that second year, but at least you've got someone who's kind of helping build your program. And I think those
Um,
graduate transfers will be more rare overall as you get as this portal life becomes kind of
Yeah,
business as
and
usual.
I wanna make sure I'm clear. It wasn't, Jason wasn't complaining about the rule. He was just
Right.
telling me about the rule and, talking about how it preserves the value of a Richmond degree for graduates that you
What I
actually
like
had
about
to.
it too, kind of unintentionally, is that you can, when the staff is looking at when you're looking at the portal on April 7th, and for the next 2 weeks you're looking at all the names that are in the portal that been added to the portal. Like, at some point there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players in the portal, probably 1,000 when it's all said and done, or plus that. And you've got to have some way to narrow that down to who you're going to reach out to and talk to. So, like, anything that's going to help cut that list down gives you more time to focus on what you're going to get. And so if there's whatever, I don't know what the number is, but if a third of the portal we can't even talk to because they're seniors looking to transfer just for their senior year of college, like, at least you're not wasting your time on trying to analyze that bucket.
But I have to think there's a lot of people that, probably would not be happy if they knew that. What I mean by that is, are we hampering our ability to recruit? Let's say we somehow convinced Shaquille O'Neal in his senior year to come to Richmond, and I'm not saying that he, would ever play 4 years in college or that he'd ever consider us, but let's say we did. We couldn't actually pursue that player, which in a way is, somewhat inhibits us from potentially, signing one of the best players out there.
Yeah. Now, I don't know. This would be kind of a lot of research to do, but I'm confident that U of R is not the only school with that rule.
Yeah. I think
Now,
I
like,
think
how does
even
that
Jason said Yale, Northwestern. He mentioned a few that were really
yeah.
strong on the academic side.
Um, and it,
So,
and the good news. Well, this is tough when you look at our team in the portal. I mean, Argerbright was clearly the one guy we wanted to make sure came back. I think Daughtry's probably second on that list of players to return, but we didn't have 7 or 8 great players returning who all contributed in a massive way last year. Let's say like our neighbors downtown did, and they're not bringing everybody back, but they may be bringing 6 of the 7 back. And there are schools like Davidson, who had a good year in the A10, and they seem to be losing everybody. Like, all of their returning good players have entered. Well, they've put their name in the portal. They haven't lost them yet. But it's hard to assess, like, how are we doing, because we just didn't have a long list of 10 plus point scorers that were potential folks that could be on the portal or not. So I think we're all happy Argerbright's back, but um,
yeah, but
you know we
what you're also saying is we need a lot more still to feel
yeah,
like
we
we're
got a
gonna
lot
go
of
into
work
next
to
year and
do to
competing.
make this a good, to even just to be a good team.
And I think
And that's
that
far from a great team.
those 4 or 5, spots that we, in theory, have open for, portal gets are very, very important to get right. That's another way of
Yeah.
saying that.
What's interesting about Tyne going on the portal, let's assume Mikel, finds a new home, gets paid somewhere and goes. Part of what I think you and I read into this, or what I read into it at least, is that our freshman Simmons is going to play a lot.
Yeah,
Because
I
at some
kinda see
point,
that.
money, like, I don't want to put words in Mooney's mouth because I really don't know how this works, but there's some correlation of how much do I think you're going to play next year and how much money we're willing to give you. And so, for whatever reason, Tyne is leaving. We don't know the details of that. But at some point, it's like, well, we know Argerbright's time is going to grow year over year. And now you have an even, like, one of our best recruits in a few years, I think, on paper, is Simmons coming in, who's another guard and a little guard. So it's like, Tyne's, another smaller guard. So I,
Right.
I hope that means we do have another stud small guard coming in, and him and Argerbright, while they're small, we can debate the small guard challenges defensively. But if we've got 2 kind of Argerbrights on the floor, that's going to be exciting.
A lot of quickness for sure. Yeah, I would say, that's probably a pretty good point that you just came up with, that probably does say that Simmons is gonna play quite a bit. Um I think if you think about this, and we're talking about how much do you pay a player, it comes back to something we talked about earlier, which is a player is now an asset, and there's a value where that asset makes sense, and there's a value where that asset does not make sense. Now, maybe we paid Argabright too much or too little. I have no idea, but it was okay. I think in this case to pay somebody too much because you had to send a message to the market you're serious about winning. But it almost, kind of calls into a point you made way back in the first few episodes we ever did about, the general manager and needing to have somebody kind of manage the front office aspect of the whole business now of the basketball program. And O'Connor, to his credit, asked a great question in that press conference about, are we going to hire a GM in the future? And Mooney did talk about that it was in John Hart's plans, or he has a plan to build up a front office. So I think that's going to still be an important thing for us to navigate this new world of college basketball.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the other thing from that, the Mooney press conference, which I have a different take on, is I think again, John O'Connor asked him like, what has he learned the last couple of years at the portal? It was kind of implied like your team's not been very good. What have you learned about the portal that's going to help you going forward? Although, again, that team not being very good, I put in parentheses because that's not what John O'Connor exactly said. But
Right.
Mooney said and kind of admitted that he thought retention was going to be really important, not just, in general, but also for a school like Richmond was going to be super important for success. And, you have 2 bad years, you're going to question, like, was retention that important? I do. I interpret Mooney's words a little bit differently because I think we've seen other experts say how important retention is, but it's retention of like the great players you have, like
it's retention of good
Argabright.
players.
Yeah, and I think I interpret Mooney's how retention isn't as important as he thought is. I'm putting words in his mouth, not words he said, but I replace retention with loyalty. And the idea that bringing back players who kind of knew your system, were kind of loyal to the system and the school, that was going to add some sort of, other element that schools that had, just transfers playing everywhere wasn't going to have. And that would be an advantage. But I think in today's world, like just bringing players back who kind of know your system and are like good kids that represent you well, like yes, you want to have some of them on your team and you want to develop everyone to be that, but just bringing back players because they fit and you have loyalty to them is not how you're going to win, or not the only thing you need to win today.
You need to retain players, but they've got to be your good players. That's exactly right. And I mean, that's another reason why Argabright was a kind of a key get. And I was happy to hear Argabright say he thought Jaden was coming back. That's another one I think that we didn't really scratch the surface on what he could be, and he's got a whole other year in the system. So I think there's some upside there to his game that we could unlock.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and we can talk a little bit around the A10 because we know there's been some other news on the men's side, is that we know we're getting more money. I think that's been clear. We don't know how much more. We don't know exactly where we were, how much more. But we also know that everyone who is good, who had money, is and even Mooney made it. Like everyone's going to be spending more. No one's spending less. So have we gone from low in the A10 to middle? Probably, but I don't think we've gone from low to middle to high.
Well, I think the article that O'Connor wrote a couple months back said we were in the middle last year, and I think the number was around 2 million. And I think the speculation is that we're going to be north of 4 this year. And that'll put us near the top quarter probably of the A10 from the middle to the top quarter. So it expresses a more serious investment. Now, I could be wrong on those numbers. It could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 3.8. I have no idea, but that I think is kind of what is in my mind. And usually,
and I think the point I was getting to is kind of the news, or I wouldn't say new, the rumor that came out when there was talk about St. Louis losing their coach and they retained him. Part of that story came with, and St. Louis is going to have $10 million to spend on players. So did we go from 3 to 5 and they went from 6 to 10? Now they had a great year, so that leads to kind of fundraising opportunities, and to retain the coach, maybe the school had to commit to more of their own resources. But I think it does point to, without the transparency out there, and I think Evan Maya, his site said, or he came out and said the colleges who are using his site, he's gotten information that says it looks like there's going to be 35% more pay, or a 35% increase to players in the NCAA. So we certainly are doing our part to help drive that increase. But yeah, again, so are all of our competitors.
Yeah, it was
in the
Mitt
A10.
Winter from Winter Sports Law that reported St. Louis is expected to have at least $10 million payroll for next season for men's basketball team. A good example of how a school without football doesn't have to worry about the revenue share cap when budgeting for its basketball payrolls. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's, St. Louis kept their coach, at least so far. There's still a North Carolina job to fill, and we'll see if that results in other jobs getting open. But
to your point, I think if it becomes an arms race for how much schools have to raise, there's probably a cap where our very wealthy donors run out of interest in trying to build the best basketball team, or any school for that matter. So we're going to have we have to have the money, at least some money, to be on the competitive scale, but you're also going to have some other angle to create value. And I keep coming back to analytics is, I think, the best chance we have of gaining a competitive edge if we're spending less than some of the other programs in our conference. And it works in almost every sport. And I mean, if you look at what Dusty May is doing right now with Michigan, they're in the championship game that's going to be played. I think tomorrow is the championship game. They're all in on analytics across the entire program. And according to the Wall Street Journal, an article came out this morning. I think the estimation is they had a $10 million payroll this year. So they're basically at where this guy thinks St. Louis is going to be at. And if that's the case, how far away are we from being competitive,
Yeah, but yeah, I know, I hear you. I think Michigan has got some good press around them in terms of the analytics, and I'm sure there's truth to kind of how they're doing that. But you watch them on the court, and they've got a bunch of
They're pretty good.
6'10" to 7-footers who are dribbling from the foul line and dunking it over two people. We're not nowhere close to that. And it is that if they have a $10 million roster, next year that roster is going to need to get, those same people would cost $15 million as
Probably.
all the big conferences are.
What did you tell me? You thought it was going to be a 35% increase in total spend?
And Patino at some point, this was during the season, he was being asked about, how does the Big East, I think there was a question about the Big East is kind of top heavy. How do you bring up make the Big East have, 10 teams in the tournament? And he said they should have a salary floor of 19 million and a cap of 21 million. And so that he was saying that as if St. John's was already there. And it was other schools that weren't.
If St. John is there, Tom, and Michigan just beat them with a $10 million payroll, I mean, so that's where I think we need to be, is where can we compete with what our sweet spot is going to be, which is probably not going to be 20 million a year for men's basketball. So,
yeah, that's right. And I do think St. John's is, at some point, Patino's also said they don't even recruit freshmen anymore. He's just taking his budget and getting spending it on the 7 best players he can, and they had a great year. Obviously, they didn't advance to the Final Four, and UConn did. But anyway, so I guess the other news in the A10 was St. Bonnie's. Last time we talked, they had already, I think, let Schmidt go, or Schmidt was retiring, whatever you want to believe there. But they did hire a new coach. They kind of everything that, again, this is one of these the rumors. The people were saying that they were going to get an inexpensive coach to put more money to NIL, and it was going to be some sort of name you never heard of. And in a sense, that's what they did. So those reports were true. They got
Mike McDonald.
Who's a alumni who had coached with Division III. Was he 3?
He's coached Division 1, 2, and 3. He coached Division 1 at Canisius and 3 at Madale.
Was he a head coach at Canisius?
I think he might have been. He said he was a head coach at all 3 levels.
But anyway, he's a kind of a unknown. I think they're pretty bullish on him for sure. But
or maybe he was an assistant coach. It says the only coach in college basketball history to win more than 100 games in D1, D2, and D3. But he was most recently at Damon University, which I believe is D2.
Okay. So we'll see what that does, but that does give them more money because they didn't go get a $2 million name out there. And I think that's a school that again was rumored to be on the bottom end of the A10 in terms of NIL spend. So that's a roster that's going to probably get reshaped over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Can we pivot to the ladies for a second?
Yeah, let's talk about the ladies.
So before we get into that, I have to send out a congratulations. So we have a good friend of the show, class of 92 grad, Scott W., who is himself a successful high school basketball coach down in the state of Florida. His daughter, Olivia, was one of the assistant coaches on that Denison squad who just won the Division III national championship, upsetting some incredible teams along the way to do it. So I want to make sure we issue a congratulations to Olivia W. for her success as an assistant coach at the D3 level and getting a national championship. It doesn't matter what level you're at. When you win a natty, it's pretty special. So congrats for that, Olivia.
Yeah, that was awesome news. Great to hear.
For sure. So what do you got for the ladies? What's going on there?
Okay, so anyway, similar conversation. You look at the portal, or at least the list of people who are leaving. We have one. It's almost like similar to AJ. We had Jada Green announce she was entering the portal. I think you and I were like, oh, I thought she graduated, but she was injured early in her career.
2 more years
so
of eligibility
left.
And I'll tell you this,
I mean,
watching all the games like I've done for the last 2 years, I mean, Jada is one of the energy sources for that team. I mean, you could always see her. She's leading the cheers in the huddle, always rooting for her teammates. So she has been a great Spider, and I wish her nothing but the best wherever she ends up. I hope she gets lots of minutes and shows the world, everything she can do, because she's been a great Spider.
Yeah. And really, the good news is that's all we have so far. That's most importantly, there's been no Coach Roussell's name hasn't been anywhere outside of U of R, and there was some nice photos of him visiting some of our upcoming freshmen as they were in their state finals. So he was on a little Pennsylvania tour, talking to some of our players or seeing their games. So that was encouraging to know. Like he's not flying somewhere to interview for a job. He's like checking out his next batch of players and helping kind of become their mentor as they come to U of R this fall.
And is it just me, or did the A10 just get a lot more winnable next year?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, again, we don't really know what's going to happen because the portal is just all a rumored list until the portal really opens tomorrow. But anyway, we saw one that URI, Rhode Island, had that great year, kind of a magical year for them, kind of their best year in 30 years or something along those lines. And their coach left, took the job at Florida. And it looks like 2 of their top returners are going into the portal, which is not surprising. You lose a coach and you have a good year. It's kind of at least a time to kind of check out if there's kind of better opportunities for you. So Rhode Island's going to be, I wouldn't say starting over. I think hopefully that they're hoping that they can just, take a next step with a new coach and different players, but they'll be challenged. And then George Mason, they had 2 of the 2 players that kind of kicked our butt in the A10 tournament were both going to come back, and now they're both in the portal. With, in particular, Walton was in the portal and then out of the portal and then in the portal again, really with over 3 days. And this is all Talia Goodman, who's with On3, seems to be the source. Like they've taken On3 has become the source for the women's portal. You can kind of look at least to everything they're collecting, kind of all the information of people announcing or agents announcing kind of who's going to enter the portal. That's a good source for that. But yeah, so Rhode Island and George Mason are both, at least right now, looks like they're going to have a little transition. And we know we're going under transition because arguably the best player ever. And
two Hall of Famers
and Rachel, who is a superstar as well. They're impossible
Simon
to
and Dewey. We lost a lot of minutes from that team.
So the 2 of our big 3 that are leaving are impossible to replace. So we know, we're going to have new players or existing
a lot of minutes
players
to be had
step up. But it is, maybe if you're just really trying to defend the A10, it's not good news. But I do like that, Rhode Island, George Mason are going through their own challenges that were unexpected. We knew about our challenges, and we've got a big freshman class coming in to help backfill some of what we've lost. But those two teams are
I haven't
going to have
looked to see if
challenges.
anybody from Davidson's in the portal, but with the losses at Rhode Island and the losses at Mason, I gotta think Davidson's going to open up as the preseason favorite if they're keeping the rest of that roster intact because they had some really
What?
good underclassmen.
Yeah. Now they did. I mean, their best player.
Yeah,
What was her name?
Charlize
She
Dunn
was a
is going to
senior.
graduate,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. So she's gone.
Katie, I think it's Katie Donovan. She was an elite 3-point shooter. She was only a junior, so
Yeah. A couple
yeah,
other things too. I mean, not that they had great years, but LaSalle, who he played a lot, their best two players, it looks like, are in the or less best two returning players went into the portal. VCU replaced their coach, and one of their top returners kind of entered the portal. Now these players could all end up coming back, so we don't really know what's going to happen. But
by the way,
a lot of players available.
6'3" sophomore center out of Midlothian, Virginia. Mia Wolfuck, who I believe is the daughter of Pete Wolfuck, former Spider, is also in the portal. She's at Georgia, averaged 14 points, 5 rebounds a game, and was a teammate of Rain Wright. So there's a big in the portal. Now I did look at her game pretty extensively. I don't see her as a 3-point shooter, but she seems to be a pretty physical presence down low.
Yeah, it's something, Porter, you and I were talking about. It's kind of just an interesting question. We're not going to have the answer, and we'll see kind of how this roster develops. But we know, you go back 2 years ago, we had, in her senior year, kind of Addie Budnick, who could block shots, could rebound, could shoot the three, and she was a player that was in, I think, Roussel's first class, or maybe was a sophomore when Roussel got here. But I mean, Roussel kind of was part of that development. I mean, Addie gets most of the credit, but I'm sure Roussel and his coaching staff get some. And like the question in my mind is, while he's trying to develop that, maybe with the freshmen that are coming in, there's a couple bigs in that class. Like when you're going to the portal, like I just don't see us being able to afford the 6'3" center who is already a 3-point shooter. But we need, like, if you looked at last year's team, as great as it was, like, we were not no one. I don't think anyone would say we were strong defensively throughout the season. We had games where we were, but that wasn't our strength. Our strength was kind of elite offense, and so I would hope we can bring in someone who's 6'2", 6'3", who's a rebounder and a defender, and can't shoot a three to save her life, but she can rebound and defend and help us.
Again, we had these little mini debates between us. I don't know if that's really what Roussel's looking for. I think he likes length, and he wants interchangeable between the 2 through 4. Now the 5, I think he also wants somebody who can get out and shoot the 3 and knock the 3 down. So I think he wants another Addie Budnick is what he wants, but that's hard to find.
Yeah, but he's
so
not going to find that in the transfer portal.
But somebody who can play inside physically and then get out and shoot the 3, because it's all about pace and space with his read and react system. And so I would be fascinated. It'd be fascinating to be in the room with him as he's putting together his list of wants in the portal and how he goes about it.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where it's going to come across more critical than it's intended to be of last year's players. But I don't, if there is a weakness in our starting 5 last year, it was at the 5 spot. And we had some games where that spot was great. Some games where the combined, they were good. And some games where we got nothing out of that spot. And I think there were 2 players who could, in theory, shoot the 3. I mean, Sam had some great nights on the 3, but still it was like, let's get bigs who can shoot the 3, try to get them off the portal. Sam 2 years ago, Tierra last year. I don't look at that and say, like, that's data that supports, let's get someone off the portal who can, potentially fit that Addie Budnick role. I think Addie's, you got to develop that yourself from, a tall freshman who's you think has a good stroke and just needs to make it a great stroke. And from the portal, like, we need some tall defensive players.
But here's the thing. I don't think the way our offense works, I don't think he wants a big who clogs up the lane and doesn't pop out and shoot the 3, because I think that changes how we approach our offense. So I think, we could argue whether or not they were the best fives we could have had, or they were the best fives for us. I think both of them ended up, playing solid years to get us our second at large bid in our history. But I will say that I think that mold may be slightly more closer to Addy Budnick in overall capability is what he will look for when he looks for his five. That's just I don't know. I'm not in the room.
Yeah.
He hasn't talked to me about it. I did actually talk to him. We were joking one time, and I said something to the effect of, nobody's going to expect you to go back to the NCAA tournament next year. And what did he say at that? When I said something like that,
Yeah, he said, like, I'll take you up on that challenge.
He seemed pretty convinced that he could get back, and I mean, that's the confidence in a guy who knows what he's doing. So again, I honestly think it's going to be fun to watch whatever the rebuilding year looks like. But I think he's going into the year thinking he can get back to the NCAA tournament for a third year.
Yeah,
in a
the
row.
one thing I was
fourth
just
year in a
thinking
row,
about
fourth year in a row. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate we never got to see how this play. But well, I know you're kind of thinking about how to, what's the ideal kind of offense we have with Coach. There was a player last year. I think we are both excited to see play more. Because when she did play, it was like the scrappy inside player who was fighting for everything, and that was Skylar Travis, who got hurt, never was able to really get a consistent role on that team. But I think we saw like, hey, that was a unique sort of player that could have come in and do something different than everybody else. And I'm hoping that he finds at least one big like that who is just like an inside menace. We never looked at Skylar and said she was going to be shooting from three. Now, we didn't get to see a lot of her, but
I mean, here's the thing
he did recruit her.
Here's the coolest thing about this whole thing, right? Like 2 years ago, I think he had the ideal team for his style, right? He had Addie inside, he had Katie Hill and Alyssa Jimenez kind of providing that length on the perimeter. You had obviously the remnants of all of the big three were there. And you had some really good backups, right? You had Anna Camden, you had Sam Dewey, you had some really good backups. So I think that was his ideal kind of like if he could construct it, what the team would look like. But last year he got an at-large bid with a completely different type of roster. Like he did not have the length on the perimeter. He had certainly Maggie and Rachel, but he played Newell and Allie an incredible amount together, which is a very small backcourt by most standards. So I think he's shown an ability to adjust to his talent. And haven't we always said, that's a sign of the greatest coaches that adjust to their talent? He might go after a 6'3" beast inside that just tears up the inside lane. I have no idea. Because, like I said, I'm not in his head in terms of what he looks for, but
well, it's interesting too. I was just thinking about what's happening with George Mason. I remember when we saw Zariah Walton kind of kick our butt in the A10 semis. And I would have sworn she was 6'1", 6'2", the way she played. And she's 5'11".
Yeah.
So there is something, and maybe the answer is, you get it's a wing player who's not who's not 6'2", who's not 6'3", but plays with that sort of strength and power. And Walton could hit the three. That's just not, she wasn't just just trying to shoot from three all day. Like she was trying to drive and punish you. And I do, and this is hard. I don't want to, necessarily say this is a Richmond thing, but I feel like as being a fan of the men's team for a long time and Coach Mooney going into his 22nd year and now seeing the women's team for 2 seasons, like we can go too far down the path of being this finesse team.
Right.
Where it's like, it's all cutting, it's all 3-pointers. You're expecting folks to get the back door or to get that pass for an easy layup. And at some point we struggle with the George, and on the men's side too, the George Masons of the world who are physical and they can shoot threes, but they also are looking to beat you up. And I feel like there's part of the opportunity in the portal is that you can get players for a couple of years in who are like, I want to just beat you up sort of players and not just always fit into the finesse side of the game, which,
I mean, it'll be, like I said, it'll be fascinating to see what he goes after and how he constructs it, and how he adjusts his coaching staff and style to whatever he ends up getting. I mean, that's one of the great things about, watching Coach Roussel is I think, he'll find a way to surprise you.
And as much as I'd like to be this tough team, the women's team did lose in Nebraska, which was just better at what we were doing. Like
Yeah.
they didn't beat us up. They could just not miss.
They just look like a better version of us for that game, right? And
Yeah,
so, I mean,
right.
I think, that's exactly right. So, I mean, shoot, if you were to do it, if you were to make the NCAA tournament 4 years in a row, I mean, we're talking about that's the stuff of legend at Richmond. That's never
Yeah.
happened to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so anyway, again, this is
And
let's
by
say
the way,
our
that makes Allie the only player in Richmond history who would have ever achieved that 4 years in NCAA tournament at Richmond.
Yeah, let's hope
in a
that.
row.
Let's hope we're having that conversation in a year from now. But this is, the portal opens in 2 days. It'll be the national championship tomorrow. Who do you got in that, Porter? Michigan, UConn, and I know Michigan's favored by like 7 or something, so it's an easy
you know what, man?
answer. But
Hurley has got such a personality that like he believes he can win any game, and I think his team takes that identity on. So they always scare me. But I'm going to go Michigan, man. That team is wicked talented, and they're just very, very well put together.
Yeah, no, I think that seems to be the easy answer. Now, I think if I was a betting man and it was 7.5 points, I'd probably give that to UConn.
I would,
where
yeah.
that spread
If you get Hurley and 7.5 points, I mean, take it. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good bet.
Okay, so we will be back at a minimum 2 weeks from now. If it's April 10th and U of R has signed 3 players on the men's team and a couple on the women's, maybe we'll be back sooner than that. But we'll see kind of what takes place during the portal time. And just, as you guys know, I mean, we'd love to. And Porter does the best he can to like try to get some news from the U of R communications stuff so we can break it. We're not news breakers here, but we'll talk about the news and try to get some inside scoops. But
I think I did break some news though when I got to write that question. I'm just saying, nobody else got that out of him. So
yeah, that's right. But anyway, until next time, this is Tom.
And this is Porter.
And this is Spiders Sounding Off.
See ya.